And we are live. So, welcome to the OSR Tabletop live stream with DM Bloodworth. So, welcome everyone that's coming in on right now or about to join in. If anyone wants to join the stream, I will put a link in the comments section. So, all you have to do is click on the link, and you can jump right in. Especially if you want to kind of not only just participate in the conversation, but also to drive it possibly in a different direction. I know I already received one comment from L, who is a very frequent visitor of my channel, that he said when we talk about faltering campaigns or giving just like hints and tips about campaigns, many of us often focus on the GM's perspective of that. And he said, basically, what about players? What about, you know, tips for players in that kind of a situation? And so I'm opening the floor up for anyone who wants to come in and talk about that perspective as well. And I will certainly touch on that as well as I go through basically my own situation, my own circumstances. So I will be keeping my eye on the lower portion of my screen to see if anyone's looking to jump in. I'm also monitoring it on YouTube to see if any comments are coming in on live chat. Sometimes they don't sync up exactly right, so I'm monitoring both. Without further ado, let's get to our topic on hand. So I will bring up, so our topic today, or my topic today, is what to do. It should be to do. What to do when your campaign falters. So let me put this in a little bit of a context of what spurred this on. So I am currently running two campaigns. I am running an AD&D first edition campaign, and I've been doing that now for, we're into 65 weeks. We're approaching session 65 this upcoming Tuesday. And it's been going very, very well. And the campaign itself, I had one, it started out with 10 players playing 10 player characters, and then around week 4, a few players departed for a variety of reasons, and I'll get into that as well. A few party members deleted and or departed, I should say, and about 3 or 4 actually came on at that time. And now over these last 65 weeks or so, we've had some additional attrition that occurred. In most cases, they have been job related, changing jobs or moving or issues like that. I will confess to other issues of players departing. That'll be part of my own show and tell basically. But it's been going very, very well. And I just started a Castles and Crusades campaign about 4 weeks ago, or possibly 5 weeks ago. But we've had 3 sessions so far, possibly 4, and it has been a little bit rougher getting that going. And so that's really what prompted this, in my mind to talk about it, is because not all campaigns run the same. Even if you do have some common players in both, which is my other situation. So let me take a look at the comments so far and see what we have going here. So no, I don't need stupid ads. I don't understand stupid ads. All right. Wrong mic. What is my if my sound is not coming through good, then let me know. If it's hopefully I get that early on, and I can try to make a mic change in the process. It should be coming through this mic here. I tested it like 5, 6 times to check sound quality. But if the sound quality is not good, please let me know, and I will try to make adjustments. Hello, Bill. Good to see you. I believe this is at least your second time I recognize echo and tinny. Crap. I do not know how to disconnect this other. I don't know how to disconnect this other microphone. Let me try this one and tell me if. So tell me if that fixed it. I appreciate it. Hopefully that fixed it. I probably went from that mic to this one. Now it's very muffled, or has it improved? Yeah, I'm going to end up replacing my camera and getting a camera that doesn't have a mic attached to it, because that's the problem, is that mic is inside a cabinet, and that's why you get that muffled sound. But if the sound improved, let me go. Sounds like a webcam mic. It is a webcam mic. Now this one here should be working, hopefully. So anyway, I will continue. Give me a thumbs up on sound if it's better. If not, I will make another switch and try to switch. Let me prepare for that as well. Nope, webcam, music only. All right, so yeah, but L, is it sounding better now since I switched mics? Mic, no change. All right, thank you. Let's go with this, and I will audio. Let's go with mic, and
there. Sounds better? Should sound better. Yeah, I'm going to replace that camera because I can't stand that webcam mic picking up sound instead. So just give me a thumbs up if it's better. Much better. Okay. Thank you, Bill. All right. So let's get back to our discussion. And yeah, I am no longer going to mess around with that. So the context, once again, I have two current campaigns running. I have AD&D First Edition. We're into our 65th week. It's 8 players in that campaign. Most of those 8 players have been with me since week 1, and then a couple of them joined in on week 4. So all have been with me at least for 61 weeks. The campaign has been going, fairly smoothly. And very, very consistently, which is another really important thing for any game master to really try to maintain, and that is a consistent schedule. When you maintain a very long-standing, consistent schedule, then you can afford to miss a session, which we have in our last 6 weeks or so. Missed one session due to vacations during the summertime. So to miss one session in a long period of time isn't going to break the campaign. However, if you're trying to launch a new campaign, such as my Castles and Crusades, missing 1 or 2 sessions, even if they're work related, I have found that it really does make it very, very difficult to get that campaign running smoothly. So one of the first suggestions I would have is that before you engage in a campaign, make sure that you're going to have at least, let's say, 3 months of uninterrupted, sequential. Now, obviously, emergencies happen, but no scheduled interruptions for those first couple of months. That way you kind of establish a routine, and you're going to find that your players do not want to miss a week. I mean, they keep on. Oh, let's do a makeup at least so that we can keep this thing going and keep that momentum going. So that's really the first fix that I have in either preventing a campaign from faltering or to help put a faltering campaign back in good standing so that you can now you can now let all of your players know that, hey, we're going to be very consistent here. Communication is very, very important. So let's get to some more of your comments. How can anyone plan anything for 3 months post COVID? Again, like I said, you're certainly going to make sure that you identify known days that you're going to be unavailable as soon as you possibly can. But no, I left room for emergencies. So things happen, life happens. Life always takes precedence over your gaming. That's fully understandable, and that's for both the DM, GM, and his or her players. I mean, things happen. So, but it does make it harder to maintain an early campaign if you have frequent breaks, early on. So, hey, Decado. And Decado is actually one of my players in my Castles and Crusades campaign. So he's certainly welcome to either come on or certainly comment. You have free reign to say whatever you want about the campaign, and I'm basically pointing out some of the issues that were all generated by me in getting that campaign to really kick off the way that I would like. And so if you have any suggestions, and that's really what this was for, is for people to come on and say, hey, here are some tips that that I have for you, or this is what's happened in my game or my campaign, and this is how I fix them, and so on. So let me bring up the next banner, and I'll show you some of the problems that can happen, and some of the problems that have happened, and then get to some of the things that I've tried to do in order to correct those. So the problem, my Castles and Crusades campaign, I think is faltering for a number of reasons. Number one, it's my second priority. And my primary campaign is my AD&D First Edition. And so as soon as I created a new campaign that is a second priority, that's something that I need to fix, because it needs to be an equal priority. And so that's one of the first things I think that you should look out for as a game master, is that you don't start viewing a new campaign with potentially a different group of players, or even if it shares some players, you don't create it as a second priority. So that's the first thing you have to be concerned about. The second thing you need to be concerned about is the time slot. And we get back to talking, like I was discussing with Elle earlier on, is that you have to make sure that time slot is a time slot that you can maintain over a long period of time without interruption, or without scheduled interruptions, I should say. And that's, another important thing to bear in mind. If your campaign has a smaller number of players, then when one or two can't make that game session, it really does change what you can actually do during that game session. So it's much more impactful if you have a smaller number of players. than it is if you have 8 players. If you have 8 players and 2 of them can't make it, that's a dramatically different thing than if you have 4 players and 2 of them can't make it. I mean, you could still do it, but it's a totally different way that you manage those two occurrences. Castles and Crusades is essentially the same genre. All right, so it's basically a high fantasy as a D&D. And the other problem that I had with it was that home brewing my own world building at the same time was very time consuming. So these were all the challenges that I was facing with that particular, with that campaign that I'm running. And all of those issues are me issues. So none of them have anything to do with my players. It has to do with just the way that I'm running this particular campaign. So let me get to some things. I can't come on, but I'll learn. Yeah, you can lean in and chat all you like, and in the comments if you wish. Yes, you can yell and chat if you need to. All right. So I think our time slot is the likely culprit. Yeah. It's a daytime time slot. And so that is that's like a double-edged sword, right? Sometimes with a daytime time slot, and I'm talking about it is 11:30 a.m. Eastern time on a weekday. And so you are, generally speaking, going to get people who are, either retired or, they work a late shift or whatever. You're dealing with a smaller pool of individuals that can make that time slot. So that's the first thing. The time slot is a little bit more difficult at that time, for that timing. The second problem with it is because it's a weekday, if my daughter's car needs a car inspection, they're going to, take the car during the daytime, and it might have to get picked up at that time, as well. So those kinds of events tend to get in the way, even if, a retiree such as myself, or I only work an evening job part-time while being retired during the day. Life things do come up kind of on a spur of the moment. So yeah, Ducato is definitely right that the time slot poses some difficulties. It also opens some doors as well, but that's something that we can look into, and you could try to find a different time slot, possibly a weekend slot that works for those individuals as well. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It works great for us because we're retired, or, like I said, I don't do anything until the afternoons, and that's only 3 days a week, as it is. So that's that's another element of it that comes to play. So let's get back to some of the other issues. So a couple solutions I came up with. So I have now moved the campaign setting to Greyhawk. That way, it eliminates most of the time consumption of trying to world build at the same time that we're playing, and to eliminate the issue of like mirrored genre, because that kind of gets boring too, I think. Is that I'm focusing more on a subgenre. You don't want two high fantasy campaigns. Now that both of mine are set in Greyhawk, I don't want them in the same area, and I want them to have a very, very different focus, so that even though they do share the world setting and they do share the very similar game systems, they are not sharing the subgenre of the campaign, and I'm hoping that that breathes a little bit more life into the campaign itself, and a little bit more enthusiasm into, my enthusiasm into it, because that was the other stumbling block that I was coming to, was that it wasn't a player driven issues with the campaign. It was my own issues with the campaign. I was finding that it was just harder to get this campaign off and running with my own, with my own head, and just making it different enough, or timing it better, or just being able to devote as much time into it. And that was all on me. And I think it was because of those problems that I pointed out that I really wanted to correct. But again, if there are player contributions that you know that could possibly correct some of these issues as well, I'd certainly welcome that conversation as well. So let me just put that up. So, what player contributions may help set a faltering campaign back on its feet? So, I'm putting that question out there. If anyone wants to join in on the conversation, I just put the link back up there again, so you can link to it on Facebook or on YouTube directly, and jump right in on the conversation. So anytime you're running a campaign, you should have good communication with your players. And players will sometimes say, well, for the next session, I would like to do this. And even though you might not get to it that very next session, you should certainly eventually get to it. Eventually allow the players to do what their characters, what they hope to do in a fairly short order of time. Now you can alter it to make it fit what's going on a little bit better, but still leave the essence of that into play, because if your players are excited about the campaign, you as the GM are going to be excited about the campaign as well. So so any time that they're asking, well, can we do this the next time, or it's been a long time since we've done this, can we do this, this particular activity or event, because that was really a lot of fun back then, and we'd like to do it again. Absolutely, you should be doing that. You should be listening to your players. Now, if the players are telling you like rules modifications that they would want to utilize, and they don't work in your campaign, or they don't work in the way that you're running your game session, then then you have to be free to say, no, that's not how we're going to do it. I initially limited some character classes, even though we started off my AD&D campaign with all of the books. I knew right up front not to allow Cavaliers and Barbarians, because I think that they're both, very broken classes in AD&D First Edition. And initially, I was leaning away from bards as well, because I've never considered a bard to be a true adventuring class. A bard is an expert hireling, in my view, and could still give them some, boosts, or whatever. They could do some group buffs if they're playing a song while they're being attacked. But but the point is that I've never seen it as a true character class, and it typically brings, I think, in the modern era, bards attract a certain type of player, which is often disruptive. And so I wasn't, really open to allowing that. However, one of my most experienced players was really, really dead set on, becoming a bard. And that's a long, long trek to do in AD&D First Edition. You have to go through at least 5 levels of fighter, followed by 5 levels of thief before you become a first level bard. So it takes a long time to become one, and the player has to be dedicated in order to do that. There is no fast tracking that, not in AD&D First Edition. So will that contribute to a campaign? In a sense, yes, because it's player driven now. The player really wants to do this. The player is willing to devote the time and the effort in order to become that, and that is going to enhance the campaign for the player and therefore for the GM as well. Let's see. No new comments yet. If you're just coming on, because I see there's a few more viewers, and you want to pop in, you're welcome to do so. I left the link up there. It was the last comment. You can just hit that link and you can come right back, right in, drop off a few ideas or make a few comments, and then you're, free to drop back out again and go back to the comment section in the chat room. So continuing on, and let's get back to our banners here, and I will, so I'll go back to some of the problems that I was talking about. And these are problems that I experienced myself with my campaign. And let me get back to that second priority status and talk about why this is a very difficult one to deal with. So when you place one campaign into that second priority, automatically you're setting it itself up to be a more difficult task for you to devote time to, for you to move it forward, for you to maintain it. So it really is a poisonous thing for you to do. And the way that you can prevent that from happening, I think, is the other aspects of what I talk about in the problem. And that is, you have to find a really ideal, comfortable time slot to run that second campaign. That campaign needs to have the right number of players for it. You don't want it too large, but you certainly don't want it to be too small. And 4 players might actually be too small. I think that if you're running a second campaign, you might want to go with a minimum of 6 players. Now, depending on your system, sometimes 6 players is very easy to get. And then other systems, they might be a little bit harder to get. But I think 6 players is an ideal for a second campaign, because 1 or 2 of them can be absent and you could still move forward. But it's not so large like my primary campaign that has 8 players, to have 2 groups of players, both of them with like 8 players apiece in it. That becomes a time consuming issue when trying to plan how the trajectory of those campaigns are moving forward. Let's see comments. Well, I think just paying attention to the interests of the players is important. A story I have told people. Yeah, really, you do. You need to pay attention to your players. That's very different than saying you need to give your players whatever they want. But paying attention to them and seeing what interests they have is, I think, very, very important. We took 15 years playing Redbox Basic only to get to level 10. At level 3, we had enough money because we didn't rush levels to buy a town. So the GM wasn't rushed either. He had time. Yeah. I think that I'll go. He had time to develop the world outside of the area of the town whilst we worked on it, and he didn't burn out and rush to keep up with the constant level gain. Yes, slower level gains do give everyone involved, I think, both the GM and the players, more time to do those other things. They're not as rushed because they know that it's going to be a little while before we get to that level anyway, and it does improve, I think, the overall pacing and tone of a campaign when it is slower leveling involved, and the players, when the players come to the table with a reasonable expectation of what their power growth is going to be, you already lend the whole situation towards having a campaign that is a much more longer lasting campaign, because everyone now has bought into that idea. My AD&D players, I mentioned back when we first began that my projection for this campaign was roughly almost 3 years. That I kind of projected it out. I tried to, do some backwards, backwards planning of it. I knew where I wanted them to eventually end up with, and where they were certainly starting from, and it was none of the in between was done yet, at least not in my mind yet. And when I started projecting that out and looking at how long it takes player characters in AD&D First Edition to really level up, that's where I kind of came up with the 3 years, or nearly 3 years time to run that campaign. Once I told my players that, they were immediately excited at the idea of being in such a long-lasting campaign. And so recently, when I said, well, you know what, maybe this will, get to that point a lot faster than I thought, they were like, oh, wait a second. No, we want this thing to, keep on the pace that it's currently at. So that means that, they're telling me that they like the pace, and there's enough going on in between levels that it's keeping them engaged. Comparing that to my second campaign, it's too early to have established that kind of a thing, but there's already been some of those hiccups that missed session, and I'm going to miss another session on November 22nd if we continue going on Tuesdays. So I can already see that it is going to be harder because of that time slot issue to maintain that same continuity. And so that's why I'm looking to make some adjustments now and bounce these ideas off of, individuals, including Takato, who's one of my players, has already chimed in. So, and his same struggle, he said, was the time slot might be the real culprit. And I think that's probably right. And it's something else I can look to adjust. I think that in my own mind, changing it to a campaign setting that I'm more familiar with and I have to do less planning for, and it's a campaign setting that they're more familiar with, that makes it a little bit easier, less time consuming. And so that's one element of it. Now, what one of my players was worried about, she was like, but I don't want to have to worry about stepping on the lore of Greyhawk while we're running this campaign. And the key thing about that particular game world setting for your game is that there are so many gaps in a timeline that you can even have a campaign sit inside one of those gaps and never have an impact on any of the events that happened obviously before it, or and certainly not on any of the events that occurred afterwards as well. Very easy to find a pocket of time in the timeline to insert the players. You could look throughout the entire world of Greyhawk to find, well, we're going to start here. And if you are running multiple campaigns in the same game world with different players, or even some of the same players, I think it's important not to have it taking place in the same region or even part of the continent as a whole with that other group, because then they will always want to, well, how come I'm not hearing about what's going on over there? Or maybe we can participate and we can join forces. And now you come up with a monstrosity of a mess trying to balance out those two potentially competing interests by unifying them. So I think that would be a big mistake. I certainly wouldn't do it. If anybody has the confidence and experience in combining up groups and doing those kinds of things, then all the power to you. That's more less. I mean, Takado's here and he runs his own campaign, and he does a West Marches campaign where you can bring in additional players, and they can come in and step back out again and everything. So, so that kind of campaign might be more open to that kind of combining up. But, it's again, a double-edged sword. Let's see. So Ducato, homebrew is great, but it requires a lot more time. Absolutely. We had a minimum of 2 characters at different levels, so we didn't conflict in the same area, 2 parties. Yeah. So each player was playing more than 1 character at different levels, so they didn't conflict, and in the same area, 2 different parties. Again, if you can manage that, that's more of, again, like a West Marches kind of campaign that you're running. It's much more freeform. I don't want to say it's more sandboxy, because my AD&D campaign is very sandboxy. The players can choose to do what they want, even though there's kind of a general trend towards a common goal that they have. But they can go off on tangents all that they wish. It's just that timeline that's kind of the underlying story of the overall campaign is still going to continue moving forward, whether they engage with it or not. And so there might be either positives, although not likely, but certainly negative consequences for not engaging in it for too long. They do have to pick back up on that storyline, unless it before it goes completely out of hand. So I've done both things. I'd say the campaign is probably about 80 20, 80% sandbox, 20%, you really do need to pay attention to this thing going on. Can't wait to jump into Greyhawk. Yeah, and that's an older campaign that I did for a while with just a single player. So that was a single player campaign using AD&D at the time, and all I did was I just set you in the same region. So you're in the Shieldlands, and there's a lot going on, and I could easily transport the adventures that you were doing, that you spend 3 sessions working on, to that setting, and really within the story of that particular campaign as well. It's just that that particular campaign now is going to have really a much more Game of Thrones kind of political intrigue and kind of situation going on than like previously. I was trying to set the seeds for that, but it wasn't clicking the same way as it had done in the past, and it was going to be harder doing a political intrigue while at the same time creating every political organization and faction and everything along the way. Much too time consuming. We did hire ourselves a few times to go get things for growing the town. Yeah, I mean, that's something that you could certainly do. I know in my AD&D campaign, the players have mentees that so they're mentoring them, they're tutoring them, and these are characters that they could control if they wish, and but these are characters that will go out and do those minor things as they move more into Dominion play, as their main characters start hitting levels 9 and above. Now they're into the more Dominion play aspects of the game, and we can spend a game session, or two, where they're playing their other characters, doing other support adventures for their main characters. West Marches is, and Ducato, you're probably much more well versed on it than I am. West Marches is basically a hex crawl kind of system where you're going out there and the players are just deciding, this is where we're going. What do we encounter? They encounter something. It's very episodic in a sense. They're supposed to, according to the original rules of AD&D, they're supposed to travel out a certain distance, then always returning back to where they started from, or going to some place where they could stay overnight safely. And it's also meant to be run in real time. So if the players are playing in game time and real time, or 1-to-1 ratio. So if you play once a week, the player characters have to cover the activities of a whole week, during that session. That way you kind of know what's taking place. And then in the week that you're off, they have to be doing something during the off week, until you come together again, that covers that. I think it's very complicated to me. And then having player characters coming and going, up to the player's choice, which one they're playing at this time. That's why I say it's so sandboxy in my mind that I do prefer a little bit more structure than what that is. But Ducato can probably explain it much better than I am. Yes, homebrewing and besides scheduling players, it becomes it chews up most of the time with session preparation. Yeah. That's the one advantage of West Marches, is that you have very little session preparation because it's all happening in real time at the moment. What I also didn't like about playing that way was that you have to rely on random tables a lot of times to create your encounters and to have them make sense. And I have yet to find random tables that I really like, because it's the players start to encounter the same things over and over and over again, using those random tables, and it's just not as structured as I prefer. So I'm going to keep the topic up while we go through these things, and I will put up your comments as we go through as well. So the topic for today's live stream is talking about what to do, and I should fix this banner. What to do? Yeah, let me try to edit this here. Why aren't you? Oh, there we go. Yeah, that'll bother me every time I look at it. So what to do when your campaign falters. And again, I was talking about this from the perspective of a GM or a dungeon master. When my game falters, these are some things that I think about or try to do. And then L, one of the commenters, was like, well, let's talk about, player perspective in that, the players might be able to contribute to moving that, taking a faltering campaign and setting it right again. Hey, how's it going? How's it going, Stan? So I can't hear you, Stan. Oh, now I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
All right. Oh yeah, I got my speakers. Yeah, let me see if I got my speakers set up.
Let me find a better spot in the house too.
Yeah, no, let me do.
My head wasn't good.
Instead of this, let me do. Here. So now I should be able to hear you through this.
How's that work?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, yeah. All my freaking audio and mic and everything has been crazy today. I don't know why.
Technology, gotta love it.
Yeah. So let's see, what else do we got here? We have so let's see. L, GM always has replacements ready to so a player didn't have to wait long for a new character since we could switch parties mid-session. Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea to have every player roll up a secondary character. However, sometimes I think you might end up in a situation where they've been playing their primary character for quite some time, and they start growing bored of that character and then want to switch over to the secondary character, but that secondary character isn't at the same level or whatever. And I think that could be a problem as well. I would probably say it's good to have a backup character, but if a major character dies and you're, very early on in the session or whatever, then it doesn't take that long for them to start piecing together a character, very quickly. They don't even have to fully stat it out or anything like that. Just, we'll introduce this new character. If it happens near the end of a session, it's a lot easier, because then you could say, all right, we're gonna have you take care of, the character's body and bring it back someplace, or do some kind of a thing. You'll probably take a brief moment to, ponder what your next step might be, because now you've lost a major component of the party before you can move forward. And, you could do things like that. And then, so you have a slightly shorter session. And then when you come back, you're coming back with a new character. You'll be able to think about how to integrate that character into the existing group. I mean, this is something I had to do when I lost 3 player characters in week 4, and then immediately brought on 3 characters for, that came in that same week. So it was like, I at least had the 1 week to think about, how am I going to bring these new player characters in, and each one had a connection to either each other or to one of the characters that just left the game. And so it worked out. So yeah, integrating new characters is something that helps maintain a campaign's flow, and I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I had to. I had the only time I've ever stopped a session early was in my 5e 7-year 5e campaign I ran towards the end, like probably within the last 2 sessions of the campaign. I literally dropped over half the party, killed 2 of them like dead, and
Yeah.
then 2 more were down. And I was like, oh wow, like we need to stop because we need to come up with what are we going to do next? Like I didn't want to just wing it and really screw up, the whole thing with 7 years. So we stopped and we come up with a logical reason on how to, because they were in a really bad spot to try to introduce new characters too. So
Right.
yeah, but we were able to logically work it out within the story. It was actually pretty cool and worked out for the most part in the end.
Yeah.
Fairly well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to have a backup. I mean,
Yeah,
I've already,
it's good to have backup. Yeah.
yeah. Even in our game, like I've already been like, this is because the fights are serious, like and you're like every one of them, you're like, well, we might not make it,
Yeah.
and the roll 20 dice roller hates us, so it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what I'm going to play next if
Yeah.
if this goes south.
Yeah. Well, you guys had our last session. You guys could not win initiative to save your lives.
Oh my god, I won it twice, but I made 3 successful rolls in that whole battle, and 2 of them were initiative. Like,
yeah,
that was it.
it was like, yeah, it's a really tough system. I mean, I
Yeah,
could see
I like it.
why. Yeah, I could see why people we're talking about Castles and Crusades, and I use the chart for critical hits and fumbles. That's in the rules, and it's one of the optional rules, but I just like it because it has so much. And it has so much going on with it. There's so much more, flair to it, but it's brutal as hell. And
oh yeah,
there's like the potential for like 3 instant kills, but luckily for them, the other side, the goblins or whatever they've been fighting have been suffering the fumbles as well pretty frequently.
Yeah.
So it's been fairly balanced, but looking at the difference between those two systems, and I think my choice of using that table is why we lost one of our players. You know what I'm saying? Because I know that, he had said, "Oh, I don't like that table," probably because
that table hits nostalgia because I don't know if you ever saw it, but back in the day, AD&D days, or maybe second edition, I don't know. But in Dragon Magazine, there was an article called "Good Hits and Bad Misses," and it was a fumble table, and it was more expansive than that. Yeah. But it was just as bad. Like it was probably worse. Like it was, and we used it and we loved it.
Yeah.
And I mean, and characters got messed up with it, but so I haven't used it in my game. I used one of the other ones, the optional ones.
Right.
But yeah, that's a fun table.
Yeah.
Like, it's like whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't fared well in any combat. I think I've been hit with a critical in every combat.
Yes. Yes. A fumble. Yeah. A fumble. You've had 2 fumbles, right? 2 fumbles, and then 1 critical hit. But that critical hit that you just got was you lost 2 fingers. It's like,
all of my what I found was just funny, and then but it's funny because all the fumbles that I've taken, and then the damages, like I blew out my knee. Well, I've been rehabbing my own knees like all summer. I lose 2 fingers. I'm missing like the tips of fingers on my hand. I got injured when I was a kid. I'm like, God, this is like true to life. It's crazy. What's next?
It's a human improvement engine.
It is. It's mirroring life.
It's just a retrospective, right?
I was gonna, when you were saying like earlier, like, well, what should we do? And I wanted to be kind of snarky and type, well, we haven't met like Spider-Man and
yes, that would certainly spice things up. The only Funko Pops I have is the 3 variants of Conan that I have. So
I've seen those. You have a couple of them. I don't have those, but I have a couple of the actual D&D ones.
There's the regular Conan. Then there's the Conan with the tiger stripe,
Oh,
from that one
oh
scene. And then
yes.
there's the blood spatter Conan.
I have seen the Conan with Tiger Stripe only
Yeah,
like online. If I saw it in person, I
yeah,
would have bought it.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
awesome.
So it's yeah,
Yeah,
those aren't hard to get, but
my
those are the only ones I have. I was like,
yeah,
I'm such a Conan. I'll have to bring them out now. I don't
yeah,
think that I
those
could
are
use
cool.
them as actual game,
Yeah, no,
tactile actual game
no,
materials.
minor decorations over here on my
Yeah,
bookshelf.
yeah.
I have Strahd, Xanathar the Beholder. I have Minsk, who was
Mm,
if you played Baldur's Gate, the computer game, Minsk, he's
yeah.
awesome. And then Warduke. And those are the ones I
Okay.
have. But
Cool.
they
Yeah.
don't travel across the table. They're decorations.
Yeah.
Like, I have like all this over here
Yeah.
to travel across the table. I don't
Nice.
yeah. I'm not using Legos and
Yeah. Yeah.
magic
I
cards
mean,
and
the only ones I
nonsense.
have from when I was a kid is I have I think these might be the original, the
Oh
original
yeah.
set.
Yeah.
They're,
Yank.
what are these? 1980, I think 1980, 1983.
Hasbro just released them again. I haven't seen them anywhere
Yeah,
to buy,
you know
but I
what?
saw a picture of them.
They were,
I probably go get them.
yeah, I what you call, I pre-ordered all of them from Target, and then Target
Oh,
sent me an email about 3-4 days ago saying we had to cancel your order because it couldn't go through, on the card. And I was like, that's bizarre because that card is still active and no problem with it. But you know what? I said to myself, because it was like $120. I got them all, and I was
oh
like,
yeah,
you know what? They're probably not worth it because they're just going to sit on the shelf. And I was
yeah.
like, for $120, there's some game systems out there that I'd like to get my hands on. You know,
Oh yeah.
um, I'm really looking at picking up Mongoose Traveler. The most recent
Oh
edition
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Because I don't think anybody still plays, or very few people still play. First edition Traveler, and so
Oh, probably not.
and so that kind of brings me, since we just went off on a tangent, but that kind of brings me back to the original topic of campaigns, is that if you're running two separate campaigns, having a
Yep.
game system that is very similar to, in each, I think that also causes a problem. That, if I were to do a third campaign, it absolutely would not be, a high fantasy, sword and
Right.
sorcery type of a thing. It wouldn't be Castles and Crusades and AD&D and 5e or a D&D Beck-Me or anything like that. It would have to be a completely different game system, a completely different genre. I'm waiting
Yep.
this month to get Mothership, the box set of Mothership, and I will probably do a sci-fi.
Nice.
I probably do a sci-fi campaign.
I've I've been watching. I'm not always a huge fan of what they've done, but Andor on Disney for Star Wars, and I ran Star Wars D6, which in my opinion
Yeah,
is the only version of that game to play
yeah,
for Star Wars because I loved it. I ran it for quite a long time, and watching that show reminds me of our campaign, and I was like, dang, I'd like to go back and just do some stuff there. And but my group, most of my group's actually pretty open about or pretty in. They don't mind doing different things. I got a couple at least one player that's like, nah, I just really like D&D, which is weird because he played Star Wars with us, but he's more like he likes fantasy, which is that's fine.
yeah.
Um, I get a little bit of a fix because I play Call of Cthulhu usually every Sunday with some friends, so
Oh,
that's
that's
been
cool.
awesome. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's another
yeah, we
game I'd
started.
like to get back into. I just got the
No,
second edition box set, and I
those
was
look
like,
awesome.
oh, absolutely awesome! How much you get for it as well.
Yep.
I mean, what a great buy. And I love the fact that Peterson Games was like, no, we're just releasing it. It is second edition. It's second edition all the way
Yeah.
through. You know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
just reprints of the old stuff, so it's not cheap scans or anything like that.
Yeah, it
And
looked awesome. I haven't picked it
yeah,
up, but it looks awesome. It
yeah. So
I
I'm
fell into Call of Cthulhu by accident because I always wanted to play it like since I started gaming. I first heard about it, and nobody wanted to do it. And then by chance, like during the beginning of COVID, we like an online group formed of
Mhm.
local people and some guys I played D&D with and stuff, and it was awesome. Like we did the whole Mass and Neil Artep campaign, and now we're doing Two-Headed Serpent. We're almost done with that. We actually started with a couple one shots. That's how it started. Is the guy we have an awesome keeper, like he's freaking just top notch, and he ran a couple one shots for us. And I was like, I had never played, but it was like Call of Cthulhu goes from 0 to 100 in like a
Yeah,
second. Like, and
yeah,
you're like, holy crap! So I'm
yeah,
like, how do you run like a long campaign with this? Like, I don't understand. Like, we're getting smashed like
yeah,
immediately.
yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, we play Pulp, and it's more investigative. And so then he ran
Right.
Mass for us. It was fantastic. Oh my god,
Yeah, yeah.
awesome!
It's
And good
a,
purpose with it, too.
I always described it because I mean I played it as a teenager, and I probably played second edition. That was probably the first one or third edition, but I think it was second. And I was like, there's three outcomes. It's like you died, you went insane, or you said screw that and you ran away and you didn't
Yep.
engage with it anymore. There was no winning in Call of Cthulhu. You weren't defeating anything, especially not not any of the, you might have killed some of the cultists or maybe some of the
Yeah.
deep ones or whatever, the minor crap, but you weren't defeating anything major, and it was like, wow. I mean, it was just crazy. We primarily ran the Arkham book and all of its little mini
Yep.
adventures that came in. What was it called? Arkham Unveiled, or what is that called? I have it behind me. Yeah, I forget what it's called. It's someplace behind me. But anyway, yeah, we just did those, those things. And most of those were just the adaptations of his short stories. So I know the one
Yeah.
with like the ghoul sitting on the sitting on the tombstone. And that was just
Reading a
what like
book.
reading a book. And that was
Yeah.
like an early one, the first time you encountered ghouls. And they screwed the shit
Yeah.
up out of it. I mean, they messed our shit up real fast. Like, damn,
That
this
whole
game is
game is
crazy.
just I have a hard time describing it to people like guys that haven't gamers that haven't played it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
man, it was actually the kind of the I think it was very much the turning stone for me, like where I wanted to get away from 5e because you play Call of Cthulhu and I just the amount of tension that gets generated by that game with good players and a real good keeper is I'm like I've DM'd a ton of 5e and D&D before that. And yeah, there's moments where that, but like in Call of Cthulhu it was so different. And I just slowly like it, I think it started to erode my like with a lot of help from Wizards and the stuff they put out. But the like for 5e, like I just wanted to go back to like, hey, every fight is like, this I mean we had combats in we've had combats in Call of Cthulhu where there was like one security guard like beat the hell out of like three of our characters.
Yeah.
Mine wasn't there, but and one of the characters was actually had like the boxer background, like he was really good at that, and we still joke about that character,
Yeah.
that whole encounter is because that one ex special forces
Yeah.
security guard just kicked the crap out of three of our characters. Like
Yeah.
it was awesome. I love that. If I was only allowed to play one game, it would be Call of Cthulhu, I think. And I've
Yeah.
only played it since 2020. I've been playing D&D since before I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I'm old
Whenever
now.
anybody ever asks me that question, if you could only play one, which one would it be? I never have an answer for that. I mean, it's so hard for me to say this would be
Yeah.
my, my one and only. The closest one that I would say would probably be Mold Phase D&D. The one I started with, or the
Yeah.
first one I owned. Let's put it that way. But that's probably
That's
the one that I
fine.
would go with. And mostly just due to nostalgia, and I think it's a complete
Yep.
system. It's like you
Yeah.
can do everything you need to with that system.
When I ran a short session the other day
Mm.
for one of my players that was introducing a new character to our campaign, and we got talking about books and stuff, and I pulled out my copy of the Rules Cyclopedia, and I was like, if I was trapped on a desert island and needed one book, that would be the book I brought because it has everything in it. Like it had setting stuff, monsters, all your classes.
Right.
It's a good book.
All right. So Lionel, welcome. Number one, number two. That wasn't a myth that your player could not win an adventure. That is no myth.
That's not a myth. That's
no,
fact.
yeah, that's a
That's
fact.
fact.
You cannot win. You're not going to beat any of the great old ones,
No,
and that's usually
no.
what you would need to win. That winning was simply surviving with your mind, intact. That was the only win that you could actually have. But
In our mass campaign, technically we stopped Neil Artep's plans, but it didn't do any because then another Elder God came in and just killed us all, like killed the world. Like it was that was an awesome campaign. Yeah, you don't win at Call of Duty. You gotta. It's a different mindset. Like if you're a hardcore like D&D player, and you gotta kind of change the way you think about games. And our
yes,
keeper was really good at the beginning. He was like, listen, he goes, in Call of Cthulhu, you start off probably the best you're going to be, and then you're just going to get worse. Whereas in D&D, you start off and then you get better as you go, and
yes,
it's the opposite.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
that was
that's the. There's a lot of game systems that actually do that, where your ordinary, your ordinary people trying to attempt extraordinary things, and that's the real, that's the real difference between certain game systems and others, right? So like you're saying, it's like I'll never forget the expression. It was like and I forget who said it too. It might have been Willem Dafoe was talking about superheroes and the differences between superheroes. And he says, Superman is the only superhero who has to pretend he's a normal person, and his alter ego is a normal person, and everyone else, their alter ego is the super person. You know what I'm saying? They have to
Right.
put on a costume to become super. He's technically putting on a costume to become normal. So that's the difference, I think, between those two mentalities, is that you could be playing someone with stats across the board in D&D with every stat is an 18. All right, you're starting off head and shoulders, already with just regular stats compared to a normal human anyway. You're pretty darn powerful. Just having 12s and everything, you're pretty darn powerful compared to
way above average.
you're way above average. But that's not what people look for in D&D. For the most part, they want to have that sense that I'm already very powerful and I'm going to become extremely powerful later on. 5e, they start out as superheroes. That's superheroes in a fantasy
I call
setting.
it Fantasy Avengers. I call it 5e Fantasy Avengers. Which is, if you like that, that's great. It's a great system for it. But I DM'd a lot of it over the last 7 years, and I'm just I say I'm tired of it. I'm actually going to my local store tonight because we're kicking off a in-store West Marches campaign there. It's the third one they've done. The second one I've been a DM for. So I'm going to do that tonight. And but for my home games, I have a 5e campaign that I'm trying to finish that we ran for 4 years, and it's been kind of a little bit on hiatus with scheduling has been awful. So I want to finish that because my son plays in it, and he's going to be going off to college at the end of next year. He's on his senior year, so he's an integral player in that game. So I kind of want to get it to a point where we can have his character depart and maybe bring in somebody new. But I went with Castles and Crusades because I just haven't seen anything really that I don't like about it. So, and it makes me feel like I actually play D&D again. So,
yeah, like I said, I think the most fun with Castles and Crusades that we're having is with that critical hit table.
combat is no joke. It shouldn't be.
And actually, all of the players are having fun with it. Because if you have people that were going to be butthurt over, hey, I just lost 2 fingers, that's As long as there's some access to cure serious injuries, cure serious wounds, then all of that
Mm.
stuff can be repaired at a fairly low level. You might
Well,
just
the
have
other
to
thing,
scrounge around for the coin to pay for it.
well, and the other thing too is I don't know if you saw it because I'm horrible with Discord, but I sent you a message and I'm like, because I was reading up on it, it's like it takes regeneration to get those pieces back, and obviously it's a high level spell, and
Yeah.
I'm like, well, Perrin's more than willing to do something for the church, like a quest, so that
Yeah.
taking that bad moment, you can turn that into a whole
Right.
like
Exactly.
adventure,
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
gotta roll with
Yeah.
it. I mean,
I was thinking a mending spell might be good for that as well, as long as you had the fingers.
we did
Um,
collect them.
Yeah, you did collect them. You didn't have the
We
ice
did.
in the cup
No,
like you
no, we
normally
didn't
do
have
on the
that.
factory floor. And that was always the thing in the factory because, and actually, even when my woodshop teacher, when I was in 7th grade, cut his thumb off,
Oh,
right there in
not the
class.
one you want to
I
lose.
mean, he just like he was there talking to us. He was using the bandsaw, and he was like, "Now you always have to pay attention to what." And he just slid the board forward and took his thumb right off. We were all sitting on the floor, and we just went wide-eyed. And then he looked at us. He looked down, and he was like, "Oh, someone get me the cup with ice in it," which was in his refrigerator
Yeah.
right there. And he just, wrapped up his hand, plopped it in there, walked out the room. Now, we later figured it out that he was drunk half the time he was in class. So that's why he probably was so like chill about it to begin with. But the guy had no
Yeah.
panic whatsoever. But he literally cut from the knuckle, just from the knuckle forward off. So he cut
Yikes.
like an inch off of his finger and
Yeah.
didn't react to it.
Ugh.
But it was like, yeah. So when your character lost his middle finger and his thumb, which I was like, I don't know how that happened, but
Yeah.
hey, it happened.
Whatever.
And
Yes.
I was like, your thumb and so that's why you're losing, -1 to Dex, because without those
Makes
two
sense.
fingers, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to hold
Yeah.
anything with just the other three.
Yep.
So yeah, we could
We
play
did.
that out and kind of stretch that out a little bit. And
Yeah.
do that side quest kind of thing that you were talking
Yeah.
about, which will work out
Yeah.
perfect actually. So and
Yeah. I just like, yeah, what I mean, it happens, like
yeah.
it's
See, now that's the
being human.
sandboxy nature of
Yeah.
taking a situation that was an unforeseen situation and moving
Yeah.
forward. That's what keeps campaigns going as well, because now you kind of know that, hey, you know what? This campaign isn't going to be predicated on a single story strand that we're going to follow from start to finish. That it's going to follow our experiences
Yep.
from start to finish. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's like, and
Oh, yeah.
what does ending a campaign look like? And maybe that's a really good important question to talk about, as dungeon masters, as players, as whatever. Like, what does a campaign's end look like? I don't think it should be something that's always like, oh well, when all of the players are gone, for real life, issues or whatever,
no.
and or
No.
if the table just implodes and everybody leaves, disgruntled and everything. That's not, but I'm like almost like a designed ending of a campaign is something that people should kind of have in their mind. This is what we're thinking about or whatever. I know that my DM in the 80s, Adam, he basically ended the campaign when we became high level and like 16 to 18,
Yep.
and he was like, all right, you're going to retire now, and it just so happened that we were probably like 2 years out of high school at that point, and people were going, like people, one of our
Sure.
players went into the military, the other one was off to college. I was in college. He was in, we just kind of all started to go our
Sure.
separate ways because, back in the day, at least in my mind, D&D was something that teenagers played,
Mm.
and then at least in my community or whatever, it's like people played it, from late elementary school, like 6th grade through 12th grade, or maybe a grade or two after that. But it wasn't a big college thing. And in my experience, it wasn't a military thing either. I didn't see anyone in the military playing,
Oh
anything
wow.
but shooting craps. It was like that was the only the only thing that anyone was playing. I mean, I didn't ask around, but I never saw it. I never saw
Right.
anyone, playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was, in the military. Maybe it's because I was a military police, and you know, just more culturally, we were, drinking and shooting dice, rather than playing role playing games. But I
Yep.
just didn't see it, So so how do campaigns come to an end? I think is an important thing to actually discuss. Like, how do you
Yeah.
plan the end of a campaign?
Yep.
So that both the players and the dungeon master are thinking that, yes, this has been a fully satisfying experience for everyone involved. And then you can pick up a new campaign, even with the
Yep.
same players, and just go in a totally different direction with
Yeah.
it
That's what
than
we're
the
doing.
previous.
That's what
Yeah.
we're doing.
So so is a campaign supposed to end? It seems counterintuitive. Well, that's what I'm asking, is that, it depends on what your definition of a campaign is. All right. And I think that there's probably several working definitions of a campaign. You could have what I would call a mini campaign, is we're going to run against the giants. Those three modules. That's a mini campaign, right? So you start to finish, you're pretty much scripted. That's a campaign. Now,
Yep.
if your players then go from that to go to the slave lords, and then the vault of the drow, and you end up doing all of those, and then now you're talking about a very long series of campaigns that are less centered on the actual adventures that you're running, and more centered on the fact that it's all the same characters. You know,
Yep.
I've heard other people explain a campaign as being, well, the campaign is the world that you created and the timeline that's running forward. And so multiple players and multiple characters can come in and out of it. And as long as your timeline and your world setting remains on its normal pace, that's your campaign. And it can never come to an end, because it's not reliant on who's sitting at the table and what characters they're playing with. So I think that's
Something to that, I guess.
yeah, I think that is probably a combination of several
Mm.
factors. You know, if I had, so I have 8 players. If I came down to just one of my original 8 players, and that player is still playing their original character, that campaign is still going. But if I
Yep.
lose all 8 players, and now I'm bringing on whole new players, that campaign ended. I don't see it as, I'm not going to say, well, the campaign world is still going forward, and so I can bring in a whole new group of people, and that's still the same campaign. No, it's gonna be so
It is
dramatically
different.
different from tone and such, that I think
Yep.
that you can't say that campaign didn't come to an end.
Yeah, my 7-year campaign, that ended. Now we could go back and revisit some of those characters because there's things in there that came up through the game and the campaign and everything that we could pursue, but it's not so much like that was a very, for me, I like I'm very like good versus evil DM and
Mhm.
world ending events, and the party's there to save the world, and that's what I like to run. And that's what they did like several times. And I just talked about this the other day with one of my players that played in that game, And I was like, there was really nothing else I could throw at you guys, like as a group, like, oh, this is gonna happen. You've already like done some crazy things. So that definitely ended, but I get the part where it's like within the campaign, because my new campaign, my West Marches, Castles and Crusade, it's in the same setting, different location, but it's 50 years past where that one ended.
Right.
So there are connections and stuff that they haven't encountered them yet. There's possibility of connections. Um, so yeah, but it's a very different campaign. One, it's West Marches, which is totally different than what we did before, and different characters, different location. So yeah, it's a different campaign. That campaign did end with the caveat that we might get a visit with some of the characters at some point if I ever get motivated to run anything at
Right.
home with fifth edition, which isn't likely right now.
All right, so let's see. We have well, we had a question here, so let me get to the question real quick. And I'm just looking at the time. I probably only have about 10 more minutes to go before I have to drive to New York City for a meeting. The joy. So over the years, what is the most annoying misconception you've heard about D&D or Castles and Crusades? Um, I just think that the most annoying misconception, I think, is that it's a that it's a game where you're supposed to see yourself represented in it.
Yeah.
I think that representation issue, I think, is just an anathema of what you're supposed to be doing. I see it as pure escapism, and it's meant to be fun. It's like, if it's
Yeah.
not fun,
So that's
your
fine. You're not going to
players
do it.
are going to come back to your table. So
No. People
yeah,
don't like to do what they don't like.
yeah, if
So
they
why would they
don't
do it?
like it, they're not going to come back. And
Mm.
if they're coming to your table for some kind of a self-affirming self-affirming application of your identity, or if you're going to the table for any other purpose than to sit down, kill a couple hours with a group of friends and have a good time and have fun with it, then you're at the table for the wrong reasons, and you
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be at that table for those reasons, or certainly shouldn't be running a table for those reasons.
Nope.
And so I think that's the biggest misconception of it. Now, I'm not saying that, because I know some people will argue, well, there's many psychologists or sociologists that say role playing is a tool. Role playing is a tool for that purpose, but not in the sense of your Dungeons and Dragons table. That's not what they're
Right.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah. I think people diving into like treating it as therapy is like, I think it can be therapeutic. Like you talked about the escapism. D&D for sure helped get me through my career because it gave me something else that I could just lose myself in and get away from my work. And yeah, it helped. Like between that and doing jujitsu, it
Yeah.
helped me get through my career. Like I wouldn't have probably made it if I didn't have something to dive into that was healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of guys in my profession, or some guys in my profession, not a lot, but
Right.
it's gotten better. But they dive into the wrong stuff, like
Right.
drinking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I dove into painting miniatures and playing D&D and telling stories with my friends and learning how to choke my buddies at the gym. So it was all healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with that. The concept of it's not designed for fun is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It's absolutely what it's designed for. Because if you're not having fun, you're not going to do it. Like I know you're a teacher. I spent the majority of my career as an instructor, and people do not do what they're not good at and what they don't like doing unless they're made to. And who's going to make you play D&D? You're going to do it if it's fun. If it's not fun, you're going to leave. Like I wouldn't do it. It doesn't make any sense. Nonsense.
Yeah. I pretty much, I stopped teaching. Like I knew my I was going to retire as soon as it was no longer fun. I was like, yeah, you know what? It's just, I don't see it going in the right direction. Now, I've always had the safety valve of an hour and a half commute before I got home. So I had an hour and a half to decompress,
Yeah, that's awesome.
and that's, I had an hour and a half going in to get myself mentally prepared
Yeah,
for the
I didn't have that.
challenges, of working at, at it. Would I rather have been playing D&D, for those hour and a half? Absolutely.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
It's like,
for sure.
but yeah, even with that stress removed, of having the job and everything in retirement now, and I absolutely love my second job, that I do, but I still value the same release that I
Hmm.
get from reality when I'm running my games, right? Because it is still an escapism.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about anything else but the people sitting at my table, even though it's virtual, sitting at my table and just having a good time. That's all we want to have,
Just have fun.
is just a good time,
Yeah.
and
Yep,
that's it.
I
I
agree.
mean, that to me is more enjoyable than sitting and watching a movie for 2 hours or 3 hours.
Yeah, especially
It's
some of
like,
today's movies.
yeah, I mean, even if I were watching the movies that I absolutely love,
Yeah, I'd rather do that. I'd
I
rather play
I
D&D or
yeah,
games.
I can't compare it to the fun that we have at our table. Again, even virtual, still enjoy it
I
much more
literally had a
so.
I ran a session, not the last session, the session before. I had we had one of the players, his character's a wizard. They're first level, so he's not powerful at all. And he in one hit was almost dead. So they became a running joke of like, oh my God, I crap my pants. He's a kind of his character's kind of a coward anyway. And two players started going back and forth about that, and they both started laughing. And one of the players, my good friend, he started laughing so hard he literally
Hmm.
passed out.
Oh my God.
Like next thing we knew, he was head down on the table, and we're like, "Oh shit, are you okay?" And we said, "Hey, you okay?" And he sat up, and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." But he's like, we were talking about it the other day because he was one of the guys that played Wednesday, and he's
Yeah,
like, "Yeah." He goes, "I passed out first."
yeah,
So I'm like, "Well, I guess I can chalk that up as a
yeah,
emotion we've driven out of the game,
yeah,
for it isn't D&D, but we
yeah.
still are able to get these emotions out of people. It's funny how that
Yeah,
works.
I'm pretty sure Shoner probably only runs one shots, because he runs a very challenging campaign, or game, session. I mean, you have to be role playing, and continuously role playing in his game sessions. I'm sure it's probably exhausting. It's probably one of the reasons why I want to get the Mongoose Traveler, so that I can actually learn it a bit, and then I'd love to sit in on one of his one shots, and try to role play to his standard, and see if I can at least do it. But yeah, that's a yeah, one shots are meant for that purpose, is
Yeah, they're
to,
great for
you
new
know,
system, learning new
learn
games,
new
and
systems, learn a new DM, and kind of see. Um, that is immersive storytelling. Yeah, and you could have, and this is something that people sometimes argue against, is that, oh well, if you're having too much fun, you can't have immersion, all right, because your fun is happening between the players, and I don't think your characters were sitting around laughing their asses off when you lost
at
your
that
your
moment
your,
they
your
weren't.
thumb and your middle finger. It's like,
No,
oh crap, but we were having a grand old time
yeah,
with it,
I
looking
was
at all
laughing. As a
your
player, I
missed
was laughing.
initiative rolls, and your
Oh
horrible
God,
attack rolls, and everything. Um, but I don't think that's immersion breaking. You know,
wow,
because the goal isn't um just hanging out and having a good time. The goal isn't your characters are going on this adventure and they're fully immersed. You're fully immersed in what your characters are doing. I think the goal is the combination of the two. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? I mean, that's the goal, is that you're kind of doing both things. You're both telling a story through your characters, and you're laughing your asses off at the table, having a good
yeah,
time while doing it. It doesn't have to be purist on either different level. I'm saying, like, I think you could really combine the two, and that's the ideal. Is to not
Yeah,
forget that
a
you're
good
playing a
mix of
game.
both.
Yeah, you're not forgetting that it's a game,
Right.
and but that your purpose is that everyone's having fun while doing it. That's the real goal for me, is
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Everybody. That's my whole thing, is to make sure, like, as I run games, I mean, I have to have fun too, but then also, obviously
Yeah,
everybody at the table has to have fun. That's if they don't, if they don't, that's, I think, the one time you can consider yourself, you failed, like a bad
yeah,
session. If we didn't all
yeah,
have fun, and
yeah,
that doesn't mean great things, like bad things didn't happen to your characters. They can happen. You
right.
can still have fun. You
Oh
just,
yeah,
that takes a little bit
yeah.
of
I,
maturity on the
I've had
player's
I've
part,
had
but
characters killed and had a ball. I was
yeah,
like, wow. As long as there's a lot of flair to it,
yep.
I
I
don't mind
lost
having a character.
my first Call of Cthulhu character in the mass campaign. He succumbed to the dark powers to save all of his friends,
Yeah,
and I lost control of him after that. Like, he became an NPC, and it's one of the best moments I've ever had in gaming. Like, it was
yeah,
just like he sacrificed himself to save everybody else, and got to ride around on this big awesome dragon thing, and mess up the bad guys, and that was it. It was great, and we ran
yeah,
into him a couple other times, thankfully, not to fight him, because he was very powerful after that. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the concept of, like, it's not for fun is just so wrong,
yeah,
and illogical in
yeah.
thinking, is
Yeah, because
mind-boggling. It has to be
like I
fun.
said, and I think that's possibly the player's contribution to it. So, what player
Yep.
contributions may set a faltering campaign back on its feet? Show up to have fun,
Yep.
and roll with the punches that happened in game,
Yep.
and don't be too serious about it, but be a little bit serious about it. If that makes sense, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Take it serious, but, like, also, that doesn't mean you're not having fun with it either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you want your character to do their best, but when the dice just roll against you, all game long,
Yeah.
just laugh it
Happens.
off and roll with it,
Mhm.
both figuratively and literally. Just
Yeah.
roll with
Just
it
part of it.
and go, and it's just part of the game. And don't get too upset about it. And a lot of that has to do with the setting the tone for the campaign ahead of time,
Right.
and of all of the safety tool ridiculousness or whatever, I don't really consider it a safety tool to have a session zero where you kind of lay
We're doing
out,
that tonight.
yeah, this is what the tone of of what our game is going to be, and these are reasonable expectations that everyone can have from me, and what I expect you to bring to the table. And everything that happens is going to happen within that framework.
Yep.
And if anything does happen outside of that framework, we can stop, we can talk about it, and then we're going to go right back to that original framework again. And
Yep.
if that's not good for you, then I hope you find what you're looking for elsewhere. But it's just setting that tone, and having an understanding. Some people describe that as the social contract, right? The social contract is, we're all going to try to show up on time. We're all going to, be accepting of emergencies when they happen, but, for the most part, we're coming together to have a good time, and to play this game. And that's it, and that's, I think that's important. And that's something that both the players and the GM can bring to the table together in order to even upright a faltering campaign, is to, shift a little bit, and, and then move forward from it.
I think with that question too, like, one of the things I know it happens in my group. I have a pretty big group, like from 7 to 8 players,
Hmm.
and one of the things that can really help motivate, I think, a game master is player investment as far as like an interest. Like if you're always chatting, not being annoying, but always like talking to, communicating with your to the DM that, hey, about his character, ideas and stuff like this. I've had so much stuff in my campaigns that was created or inspired because of what they said to me. Like, oh, I'm like, I never thought of that. Like, oh, you're interested in that? That's cool. Like, and then I just take it and twist it and make it awful for them, and make it different. So it's not exactly what they asked for. They get what they want, but in a different way. But I think that shows like, and I have players that do that more than others, and the campaign tends to, like, when I run campaigns that are more heavily like focused on character backstories and stuff. This current one isn't. Those characters get a lot of attention, and then they build these huge arcs. And I'm lucky to have a great group of players that are willing to dive into everybody's arc and just have a good time. But I think don't be afraid to be like, hey, I'm thinking about this, and then that might spitball an idea for your game master.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you sent me that that DM on Discord. Hey, you know what? I don't mind having to do some kind of a task in order to get the spell that I need to put my fingers back on. And
Right.
it's absolutely it's a good way to go forward, and so you'll play a session or whatever it takes, with your -1 dexterity and not being able to use that hand, to the fullest extent. And it's a good way to, to keep a campaign going, because now an event that occurred last has an impact on what's happening now and is going to lead to something in the future. And that's the other kind of campaign continuity that, that's important to maintain, is that, actions and events have consequences that, you either resolve, or if you leave them alone, they could fester and become either worse or just become something totally different, and so on. So,
and good players are like
yeah,
key to like the campaign moving forward. Like,
yeah,
just the stuff, if you're willing, like with this example, like if say a year from now we're playing and we've already taken care of that problem, but a year from now we look back and like, oh, remember that thing we did? Well, we had to do that to get my hand fixed. And it helps push the game forward. It's not just a DM doing it.
Yeah. I'm just going to flash through these. So yeah, I am going to have to run, but thanks for popping on and adding to the conversation. And all right, Lionel, thanks for coming in too. And later. All right, so good way to finish off. So everyone have a great afternoon, and I'll do some kind of a live stream sometime next week as well. And hopefully I don't have work the following day, the following hour or two afterwards. So, all right, everyone, take care.
See ya.
All right.